We're here at the Major Reuben Colburn House, and I'm pretty excited to be here actually. Been looking forward to doing this video for a while now. The Major Reuben Colburn House is a historic landmark in Pittston, Maine, and Reuben Colburn himself had a very big part or role in the failed Quebec Expedition of 1775, the one that Benedict Arnold operated. So I'm going to just tell you all kinds of stuff about this. I'm going to give you 5 points in just a minute, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of a tour around the house, just a very light one before I get started. Now this is in Pittston. It's on Arnold Road in Pittston. I don't know if you can see back here. This is the back side of the house. This house is beautiful. It was built in the 1700s by Reuben Colburn and his brothers. Let me see. Okay, I'm at the back side of the house. The sun's coming in this way, but I'm at the back side of the house, and down over this hill, which you can't see because of all of this foliage that's in the way. The Kennebec River is right down over this house, down over this hill, sorry. Reuben Colburn was a boat builder, so it made sense that he lived right next to the river. He had a friend named Thomas Agri who lived just down the way over here. They were practically neighbors. He also was a boat builder, and they were, like I said, they were good friends. Agri actually went in with him on the boat building job that Washington demanded. Basically, they couldn't do the expedition without the boats, and so Colburn and Agri built the boats together. Reuben Colburn arrived here in what is now Pittston, Maine in 1761. He was 21 years old and full of energy, focus, and direction, so it came as no surprise he was recognized as a natural leader within Colburn Town, a tiny village which his family helped start. The Colburns were no stranger to the hardships and success of frontier life. Their family ancestry in New England dates back to the 1600s when they were directly involved in the founding of the town of Dunstable, Massachusetts. Reuben came here with his entire family to be a part of that same type of venture, hence Colburn Town. His family members were his father, Jeremiah Sr., mother, Sarah Jewell, 3 brothers, Jeremiah Jr., Oliver, and Benjamin, and 4 sisters, Sarah, Rachel, Lucy, and Hannah. The Colburn family had emigrated from north-central Massachusetts, and they'd done so under the invitation of Dr. Sylvester Gardner, a wealthy land proprietor in the Kennebec Valley region. He was a physician by trade, but he made his money in real estate deals, importing drugs from Europe and operating at least one hospital to address the ongoing smallpox issue in and around the Boston area. Dr. Gardner moved from Boston to the Kennebec Valley region in the District of Maine in 1766. He was here in this region physically, so while Sylvester Gardner was a real estate mogul in this region, he was also selling off large chunks of land to new immigrants he had invited to settle this area. I bring it up that way because the Colburns were the heads of their burgeoning little village. Their manner of carrying on in their day-to-day lives mattered greatly to the people around them, who depended on them for leadership and survival. Reuben Colburn was surrounded by boat builders, but he was the only owner in a vast distance to have a shipyard large enough to become the primary place of employment for a dependent citizenry. His opinions mattered greatly to a significant number within their relatively small population of Colburn Town. Getting straight to the point, real estate mogul and Kennebec proprietor Dr. Sylvester Gardner was a wholly dedicated loyalist, which is someone loyal to England. And Reuben Colburn, leader of tiny Colburn Town, was a wholly dedicated patriot who encouraged a separation from England. Reuben Colburn owned a shipyard, the Colburn Shipyard. He, like every other business owner and colonist in the New World, had been victimized to the point of oppression by England's taxes and tariffs, and he had to watch all the best white pines on his own land be branded with the King's broad arrow marked for the Royal Navy, cut down and carried off, all while he was a shipbuilder in need of those very same trees. The trees on his own land were being taken from him, and England was still taxing the life out of him and his business. His dedication to revolution did not come easy, nor did it come swiftly, and there's proof of this within the Colburn House itself. The English Crown had passed a law decades earlier in 1711 called the White Pines Act, and it basically restricted anyone from cutting down trees that were more than 24 inches in diameter. These trees would be branded with the King's brand and cut down to serve as masts in the Royal Navy. The largest boards found in the Colburn House, which was built in 1765, 54 years after this law was passed, are measured to exactly 24 inches. Meaning, up until a certain and fairly sudden point, this family was dedicated to following the rule of law as England expected them to. English oppression via taxes, tariffs, and the aggressive exploitation of all the best shipbuilding trees in the area led to a royal disdain in the Colburn household. Reuben decided to make that known to all by staking a nice fat liberty pole in his yard for all to see, including Dr. Sylvester Gardner, the man who invited Jeremiah Sr., the Colburn patriarch, to help settle this patch of paradise on the Kennebec River. A liberty pole was a visual dissent against the British Crown and a very clear representation of the population's political leanings. Gardner and the Colburns couldn't be more polar opposites, and there was slightly less loyalty in the community at large for the former than the latter. Reuben Colburn's shipyard was the heart and soul of this town's economy. He put money in the hands of his townspeople, and indirectly a roof over their heads and food on their table. His influence was not to be underestimated. As a matter of fact, Dr. Gardner was exiled from the region in 1776 when the British fled Boston. He ran off to Canada, had moved back to England where he'd previously studied medicine, and his name was associated with other loyalists in the Massachusetts Banishment Act of 1778. So not only was he chased off by the very patriots he helped settle onto land he sold them, he also lost almost everything he owned, including all remaining lands still under his name when he fled. Reuben Colburn was all in when it came to the subject of separating from England, and so was the rest of his family. His brother Oliver started a small local militia with the foresight that declaring independence was on the table and militias would be necessary to forge the way forward. Oliver was a captain of this militia, as was the eldest Colburn son, Jeremiah Jr. Younger brother Benjamin was a lieutenant, but Reuben eventually rose to outrank them all, earning the title of Major. Direct involvement in the revolutionary effort by Reuben Colburn came in 1775 when King George decided Massachusetts Bay was in a state of rebellion and ordered Boston Harbor to be completely blockaded. This single act threw the rebel cause into a next-level situation. Planning for offensive missions were put into action, including, and most importantly, the attack on Fort Ticonderoga, which Benedict Arnold led. It was a success in that the mission goals were achieved, to take the fort and walk away with its cannons. The cannons were desperately needed back in Boston. Benedict Arnold returned to Cambridge, Massachusetts with the prizes in tow, and he immediately started looking for General George Washington, who was stationed nearby. He wanted another command. He wanted a serious command, and he wanted to make a real and lasting impact for the revolutionary cause. At the same time, Reuben Colburn had arrived in Cambridge looking for a way to help the revolutionary cause in a manner that served the community he lived in. His primary concerns were safety and continued economic stability, both which were threatened within the past year. In August of 1775, these two forces, Colburn and Arnold, wound up face to face, and the beginnings of a plan to attack Quebec by way of the District of Maine was hatched. Okay, so here are 5 things I think you might want to know about the Major Reuben Colburn House. The first thing I think you might want to know is that this house was the headquarters for the Quebec Expedition of 1775. It was the headquarters during the dates of September 21st through September 23rd, 1775. The river is right down over the hill. I can't see it from here with this camera, but I hope to give you drone footage of the river. It's right down there. Now, Reuben was a boat builder, and his boatyard was probably right down here. So anyway, this house was the place where all the pre-planning and planning took place. The military leadership stayed here. All the maps were laid out here. The logistics were compiled here. This is the headquarters. The second thing I think you might want to know is about Major Reuben Colburn himself. Major Reuben Colburn had a very good relationship with Native Americans in this area and up and down the Quebec River. It's important in the overall planning of the expedition that George Washington knew that he had this type of relationship with the Indians. I'll get more into that later. But basically, they had like an open door policy to his house. They could come here even when he wasn't here. When they would travel from long distances, especially like in the wintertime, where they would go from like point A to point B, like long distances, and the Colburn house was between the 2 points, even if he wasn't here, even if his family wasn't here, they could come in, use his house for shelter. They could sleep in front of his fire, sleep on his floor, stay warm by his fire, eat his food, treat it like it was their own house. Yeah, and I mean, they used to come in normally and routinely. They'd eat dinner with him and his family. I mean, they were really good friends. It wasn't like just a working relationship. It was a social thing. They were very good friends. The third thing I think you might want to know about Major Reuben Colburn is the longest, and this one's the longest out of all 5. And that's that it was Major Reuben Colburn who initiated contact with George Washington down in Cambridge, Massachusetts, to pitch the idea that the Continental Army attack the British at Quebec by way of the Kennebec River route. Now, so it was his idea. He hatched this idea and pitched it to General Washington. Now, there's a whole lot that goes around why, what happened and what took place, like how the attack was planned. But I will preface that by saying, I don't want to get into too much detail, but there was an attack that was being hatched to attack Quebec on the west side of the city. And that's because Benedict Arnold was in Quebec, in Cambridge, Massachusetts, when Reuben Colburn arrived at the beginning of August 1775 to pitch this idea. Okay, so Benedict Arnold was already in Cambridge because he had returned from his taking of Fort Ticonderoga in May. So in spring, he and Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys from Vermont, they together went and took Fort Ticonderoga, which was in northern New York. Fort Ticonderoga was it's in northern New York, and it's on the western side of Lake Champlain. I'm trying to visualize this as I'm talking to you. So it's on the western side of Lake Champlain. The northern tip of Vermont is on the eastern side of Lake Champlain. The British are directly above that. There's the northern border to Canada, and Quebec and Montreal were right there, right above the northern tip of Vermont and northern New York, okay, with Lake Champlain in the middle. Ethan Allen was he and his posse were patrolling northern Vermont, making sure that the British stay where they're supposed to be, that they don't come into this territory. Now, Ethan Allen is not a part of the Continental Army. He was the head of his own little militia. So he didn't answer to the Continental Army. He announced loudly and boldly enough that he's going to take his men and they're going to cross Lake Champlain and they're going to attack Fort Ticonderoga in northern New York because it is poorly manned, it's dilapidated, and has all kinds of munitions inside it. And what they were afraid of was that the British would realize the importance of Fort Ticonderoga and they would build it up, man it stronger, and then maybe add more munitions to it, and then they would use it against everybody up in that area. So Ethan Allen said, we got to do it now. It's unmanned, it's not manned very well. It's falling apart, and it looks like the British aren't really taking much interest in it, so let's go get it now. So the Continental Army heard about this, and one thing led to another, and Benedict Arnold, who had been begging for a commission because he hadn't had any really important military missions yet. He was begging for a commission. He wanted to climb that ladder of military leadership. A lot of men did. He was no exception. He finally got his commission. His commission was to go meet Ethan Allen in Vermont, and then they would travel across the river, the lake, and then they would take down Fort Ticonderoga. And so what happened was they did that. They met They kind of argued about who was going to be in charge. Because it was an official act by the Continental Congress and the Continental Army, it was Benedict Arnold who was named the leader. But anyway, they went over there in the middle of the night. They knocked on the door. A sleepy sentry opened the door, and basically Benedict Arnold and Ethan Allen were like, surprise, we're here. And nothing really happened. They just kicked out the British. They left. No shots were fired. It wasn't a big battle, but they took it over, and it became the very first Revolutionary War victory for the revolting colonists, for the newly formed America. It was the very first one. Benedict Arnold's name is, if they had neon lights back then, that's where his name was. This was huge. Now, he expected a little bit more patting on the back and applause and all that. It didn't last long. Within the month, a general was sent up to relieve him of that station, and so he was displaced. He was not happy about it. He wanted to revel in the glory of this defeat longer. But no can do, said the Continental Army. So they sent him to Cambridge, where he sat and twiddled his thumbs next to George Washington's army that was just sitting there idle, basically, just waiting for something to do. That's the point, is that Reuben Colburn rode into town at the beginning of August while Benedict Arnold is chomping at the bit, begging for another commission. He wants something to do. Now, on the way back, well, right after they took Fort Ticonderoga, Ethan Allen and Benedict Arnold started this heavy campaigning of just telling the Continental Army and the Continental Congress that now's the time. They've opened up the northern border. Let's go attack the British at Quebec before the British realized, to use that force and to come down that way and attack the colonists or the newly formed America below that border. So they just kept basically pounding this message. We have to use the Lake Champlain route, this northern route. We have to attack. We have to attack them now. That's on the western side of the city. So when Reuben Colburn rode into town, he was thinking, hey, why don't we use the Kennebec and attack them on the east side too? So this is what Reuben Colburn did for this expedition. He went down, he pitched the idea. He brought 5 local Native American chiefs with him. One of them was a Sagamore. A Sagamore is a chief that is slightly higher in rank than the other 4 that were with him. So he did the talking. The other 4 didn't do much talking at all when they met with George Washington. As a matter of fact, I don't think the other 4 were even in the room. So Reuben Colburn meets with George Washington, pitches the idea, and then tells him, I brought 5 chiefs with me, so you don't have any problem with, you won't have any problems with them. And he let the Sagamore speak on his own behalf and the behalf of his the other 4 chiefs. He told George Washington that he would pledge half of all the fighting men under his leadership, which he had a very large tribe compared to the others. He said the others didn't have the numbers that he had, but they all pledged their allegiance and loyalty to the colonist cause, to the American cause, to the revolutionary cause, and he told Washington, you will have no problems with us. We are on your side. The other 4 couldn't pledge as many men because their tribes, they led like smaller numbers of men. So they just said that they would pledge however many they could, but it wouldn't be nearly as many as the Sagamore could, but that was okay. This pleased George Washington. He thought, okay, maybe this could work. So he sent Reuben back home here to this house to start collecting logistics on whether or not this could actually, this expedition could even happen. And so he sent him home with a list of things to do, like tasks. And the most important were that he needed to find maps of the region, maps of the river, maps that would tell information about water depths, waterfalls, obstacles in the rivers, boat portages, stuff like that. And he got all those maps from a man named Samuel Goodwin. Now, Samuel Goodwin lived in what is now Dresden. It's a little ways away, but it's only like maybe 2 or 3 towns over. Later on, after the expedition failed, scholars took to studying the ins and outs of how everything went down, and they discovered that Samuel Goodwin was a British sympathizer, and he lived in a community of British sympathizers, and so they put a lot of skepticism into the veracity of the maps that were given from Goodwin to Reuben Colburn. But Reuben, I don't know if Reuben knew that at the time. It would be surprising if he did. But so he had to get maps, and then he had to get food, and for 1,100 men. So I'm not sure how many pounds or barrels were necessary for the pork, corn, and flour that were necessary for this trip. But I will tell you that he needed to get 60 giant barrels filled with 220 pounds of beef each. And I'm telling you all this so that you can understand the bulkiness of what was necessary for the boats that were going to be needed to truck this stuff up the river. So that brings me to point number 3. Reuben Colburn needed to secure the materials necessary to build 200 bateaux. Okay? So he didn't need to have the boats built. He just needed to assure Washington that he had the materials to build the boats. And the boats need to be big enough to carry this massive amount of weight, and the men and all their gear. Okay? The fourth thing I think you might want to know about this about the expedition is about the boats. So Reuben Colburn was tasked by George Washington when he, okay, so before I go into number 4, let me just finish off with number 3. So basically what happened was Reuben was sent back here to get all the stuff, get all the information, all the logistics nailed down for what I just said here. In the midst of getting the parts and pieces, because he didn't get it all in one day, he didn't get it all in 1 week, he got parts and pieces. He rode back down to Cambridge a number of times, like I want to say 2, maybe 3 times, between the beginning of August and September 3rd. On September 3rd, he had given enough information to George Washington that George Washington agreed this is a go. And so he sent Reuben back here with a letter, or like a, I don't know if it was a contract, or it was a directive. And the directive was, Reuben Colburn, hire 20 men to build 200 flat bottom bateaux, and I will pay you, and the government will pay you 40 shillings for each boat. Now each boat had to come with 2 oars and 1 setting pole. Okay? Now a flat bottom bateau is, these types of boats were traditionally used out in the wilds of uncharted territory of what is now the United States, but back then it was just uncharted territory. It wasn't any part of the United States. But trappers and traders used to go out there for months at a time, get their pelts, their beaver pelts, their furs, whatever else they would get, and they would stay out there for months, and then at the end of the season they would need a big boat to put all the weight of all of their pelts and stuff into. And so they use these flat bottom bateaux. They're very long boats. They could carry 2 men easily, maybe 3, and 1,000 pounds of weight, literally. So that's why this style of boat was chosen by George Washington, because it could carry a lot of weight. Hey everybody, I'm back here at the Reuben Colburn House for another trip here, and I wanted to make sure that I came back to clarify something for you, and that's the size of the bateau. I want to make sure I make this clear, that the bateau that Reuben Colburn used or made for the Benedict Arnold expedition to use up the river were a lot smaller than traditional bateau. Traditional bateau could carry 1,000 pounds of gear and 2 to 3 men. The bateau that Reuben Colburn made for his men, for the Benedict Arnold expedition and those men, was much smaller. I want to say, like, it looks like almost maybe half the size, and it carried 4 men and only 100 pounds of gear, and looked a heck of a lot more looked a heck of a lot tippier than the traditional bateau that General George Washington was expecting to be built for this expedition. So I wanted to make sure that I came back and I clarified that right here at the Colburn House. The only problem with these boats is They were, I'm going to use the word tippy loosely. They were tippy, but not so tippy that you get in them and you have to be careful, so super careful that you're going to tip it over. I mean, they're meant to be on riverways, but they do have a learning curve. You should spend a little bit of time in these boats without any hazards around to learn how to maneuver them before you're sent out into open water. The troops did not have any learning curve whatsoever. They arrived here, were assigned a boat, put their gear in the boat, and basically went up the river. Now, let me get into the boat. So this is point 4. Now we're on point 4. Reuben Colburn has this directive, build these boats, this many boats for this many people. And so he builds the boats. Well, he has the materials to build the boats. He told him he had the materials to build the boats. So yes, he did have the materials. But here's the problem with the materials. The materials were fresh. So the way lumber yards worked back then, I'm not sure if this is how they work now because of today's technology, but back then they had to cut in the spring and the summer and then set the wood aside that they cut. They set it aside and then they set it aside so it would dry all year round. So it would dry through the winter, through the fall, through the winter, and then come back around. When spring came, that's when people were coming out of their houses, getting ready to build things. They wanted to build things. They wanted to build their fences. They wanted to build their sheds, their shacks, their houses, their boats, anything that they could build. They built spring and summer. So they used the last year's wood because it had dried all year round. What Reuben Colburn had at his disposal was wood that was just cut that spring and that summer. So it was wet. I wish I could use both my hands right now, but I can't. Let me just explain this in the simplest of terms. When you put two pieces of wood together, so this piece and that piece, you put them together, well, that's not going to keep out water. So you have to put like a sealant between them. So you put the sealant between the two boards and then you put them together and then they dry together and then that would help seal out the water. The problem was that all the wood was wet and the sealant's wet and when they put them together, nothing's going to dry and it's definitely not going to keep water out if you put it in the water. And to add insult to injury, the dates. He got the directive to build the boats on September 3rd. So even if he started building the boats on September 4th, they arrived here, and this was the headquarters, on September 21st. They had to build 200 flat-bottom bateaux, big enough to carry all the men, gear, all this stuff, and it had to be dried and like river-worthy in less than 20 days. It was a bad mix. It's one of the reasons why the expedition failed. These boats, when they put them in the water, because they weren't sealed, they put them in the water, they immediately started leaking. They didn't have to do anything. They weren't sealed. They immediately started leaking. So you had these guys sitting in these boats. At best, they're dumping out water if they can. And that's exhausting. I mean, think about it. They're oaring these boats up the Kennebec River. And if you've never seen the Kennebec River on like a pretty rough day, it's something. It's a challenge. I wouldn't want to be out on the river in those days. And this is a thought that I just can't get out of my mind. They went from here up to Fort Western as their first stop. The rain was coming in sideways. The whole time that they were there, it was pouring. It was September. It's cold in Maine in September. We expect these cold rainstorms. They were rowing up these sinking boats. They put the boats in the waters and the men they're oaring up the river while they're sinking. They have to keep pulling the boats over and dump out the water, put them back in the river, go back up the river. These guys, they weren't trained, so they were tipping the boats. All their stuff was going on the bottom of the river. The rain's coming in sideways, so they're getting rain coming in from the top, which is going into the boat. They're getting water coming in from the river, which is they have to keep bucketing out of the boats. It was a bad time, and it's one of the reasons why the expedition failed. The fifth thing I think you might want to know, you might find fascinating about the Major Reuben Colburn House are the people who stayed here. So there was 4 people in the expedition and a 5th person who wasn't. So among the people who were in the expedition was Benedict Arnold, traitor to the American cause eventually, I need to say that Benedict Arnold was an asset to the American cause. Before he was a traitor, he was a very good soldier. The second person would be Daniel Morgan. He was a French and Indian war hero. He was also Daniel Boone's cousin. Then there was Henry Dearborn, who was a Revolutionary War hero, and he actually became Thomas Jefferson's Secretary of War. And then we had Aaron Burr, who was 19 years old. Aaron Burr was a really good soldier also. Politically, he was kind of a scoundrel, but as a soldier, he was 19 years old. He went through this area. He was sowing his wild oats. Man, there are stories. If you can read up on Aaron Burr, I definitely suggest doing so. That guy was a character. And then the fifth person, who had nothing to do with this operation, was John Hancock. Reuben Colburn and John Hancock were good buddies. John Hancock had land holdings all around this area. So whenever he'd come up here to check out his land holdings, he'd stay right here with Reuben Colburn. So those are the 5 things I think you might find interesting about Major Reuben Colburn and the Major Reuben Colburn House. Now, of course, bonus number 6. Is it haunted? The short answer is we do not know. We haven't heard any stories of it being haunted, but the long answer is I would definitely like to investigate this place, because this house has all of the characteristics of a house that would have stories of paranormal activity. It's old. It was built in the 1700s. It was in the same family for generations. There's a lot of turmoil that has happened in this house, especially when it comes to Reuben Colburn himself, because he was bankrupted by this deal with the Continental Army, or the Continental Congress, I should say. They promised him 40 shillings per boat, and they never gave it to him. They never paid him for the boats. And it bankrupted him. So he probably went through a lot of economic hardship here, for a short period at least. His family tried to recoup the cost of the boats for years, even after he had passed, for years. The Congress's response was they got tired of hearing from families like Reuben Colburn's and other families like his, because there were other families in the same similar situation where they were promised payment from the government and never got it. Payment for help that they gave toward the revolutionary cause. And they weren't paid either. So they were hearing from more than just Reuben Colburn. And so Congress finally decided one year to pass a law that said if you were not paid for your revolutionary contributions by this point in time, you are not getting paid. Stop asking. Okay, so they were stiffed. Reuben Colburn was stiffed. But his family did live here for quite a period of time, so you can imagine there were births and deaths in this house. And when it was finally sold out of the Colburn family into another family's hands, they found all kinds of artifacts in here, old artifacts. There's a list of artifacts. I can't remember what the list was, but it was impressive. So yeah, I mean, could it be haunted? We've been to a lot of old historic sites in Maine. We've investigated quite a few, and they share certain characteristics between them. And this place definitely shares similar characteristics. If this house was here at least in 1765 and it's 2024, you can imagine that it might have some paranormal activity going on in there. But we don't know for sure until we investigate. So I definitely suggest when this museum opens, come take a visit. All right, so that's all I have for today for this video. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. But if you have anything you want to discuss, absolutely hit me up in the comments down below, because I love talking about all these historical subjects. This house is awesome, and Major Reuben Colburn is fascinating. I would love to talk to you guys about him. Okay, till next time, everybody.